Aloha Kako. Um, I have something written, but I'm going to kind of go on and off of it. But I've lived here for 47 years. I'm a farmer, and some people sometimes call it your vocation. But Greg, the chocolate guy in Keaho, told me that it was my avocation. And I didn't know the difference, so I learned that. and so the year was 1977, and I moved here with my first husband, Lair, and our 1.5-year-old daughter. I was 21. Left my college in California, in Sonoma County, and it was the Back to the Land movement. We were definitely part of the, members of the 60s counterculture. And the idea was to buy land, make a home, grow food, and raise children. Just simplicity. And we brought our 1964 Chevy van, landed in Hilo. We felt this was as far as you could get from America and still be in America. And the best advice we got, we stayed with a wonderful woman in Hilo, Suzanne Gump Mallory. She was from the Gump family in San Francisco. And she told me, don't buy land in Puna. And I'm saying, yeah, I'm so glad you told me that. For many reasons. I mean, I don't have anything against Puna, but I don't want to live there. So we stayed at her house for about a week, and we drove over here, and we went down. Someone told us we could camp at Napopo Beach. And back then there was a beautiful beach, before the few different hurricanes that wiped out the sand. And we drove down Napopo Road, and there was no lights. It was dark. We didn't know where we were going. We were like driving down this road, and it's absolutely dark, and I was so scared. But we got down there, parked our van, and then in the morning we were, you open your eyes in the morning, and there was the blue ocean. And yeah, I think we camped there for 2 weeks. It was amazing. Back then you could do that. They didn't chase you out. So we were lucky to find our farm. We originally had a partner, but later we bought him out. And it was a Kealakekua ranch lease. And Amy Greenwell, her brother Sherwood was our lessor. He was our landlord. And he was a wonderful man. The history of the farm was that it was under the control of the ali'i Ane Keohokalole. And she was the mother of King Kalakaua and Queen Liliuokalani. And during the Mahele, which was, the period where it was signed a decree that foreigners could buy land, it was bought by a European. And then H.N. Greenwell, the grandfather of Amy and Sherwood, he purchased it. He was the original Mr. Greenwell, the person who had 10 children, and his wife had the children, but yeah. They had 10 children. So we live directly, Nauka, of this garden at 2,000-foot elevation. I believe we are part of the Gardens of Lono, just like this farm, just like this garden. And when we built our house, we built a geodesic dome. You could see it back then, right from, it used to be Andy's Liquor, but now it's the taco place. If you pulled over there, there were no invasive, all these avocado trees and tulip trees and everything that have grown up over the years. You could see straight up the mountain. You could see our dome. Not at all now. You could never see it now. But anyway, and in 1900, Mr. Kunitaro Motomura, a former sugarcane plantation worker, hand-cleared 20 acres and planted it in coffee. And our 5 acres is part of that 20. And for those who don't know, the Japanese Americans, really here, we consider them the pioneers of Kona coffee. They are the ones who came, most of them left the sugarcane plantations. The conditions were very poor in the plantations, and many of them ran away, and that's what Mr. Motomura did. He ran away. He was not going to be treated like that anymore. And they kind of heard that if you came to the Kona side, you could be an independent farmer. And there was really the only kind of one of the only places in Kona where you could be an independent farmer, because everywhere else it was plantation. Because, the plantations went from, the south point to the north point on the entire windward side. So, yeah. In fact, when we, well, yeah. So, in the early years that when we were here, Mr. Motomura's grandsons, Paul and Frank, were our neighbors. And, Frank told us that he walked at night and slept in the bushes in the daytime, because they were out hunting for him when he walked to Kona. And there was, interestingly enough, there was a form of the Underground Railroad here, where the other folks kept them safe until things blew over. So, in 1978, while I was very hapai with my second daughter, Mara, I was fortunate to take Hawaiian ethnobotany with Bobby Kamara. He's this gem of a human being, knows everything, and he lives somewhere near Volcano. I'm not sure exactly where he's living now, but he was this amazing person, and I learned the crazy thing is that everything I learned from him, I kept from my whole life, and I can't say that every school thing, every college thing or high school or whatever that I learned that I remembered, but I remembered all the ethnobotany. And I've always loved the endemics. I have a real passion for them. And one method that I've used to learn the endemics, which you might find this helpful, because sometimes you're bombarded with 20 different kinds and you're like, how am I going to remember all those? So I sort of made a habit that every time we would go to the volcano, either because lava was flowing or maybe just holo, we'd go to the volcano, and I made it my commitment that I was going to make 2 new plant friends. And that worked. And it's much easier to learn them in small bites, but also planting them is also great too, because when you plant them, you learn them. So, in the early days of our farm, we were working full time, fighting back the jungle on the weekends, and because we were organic farmers, we weren't spraying Roundup, there was always lots of weeds. And I tell people now that they can't hardly believe it, but our biggest weed was California grass. Do y'all know what that looks like? It's about this tall. And we just thought it was... we thought it was horrible. It was just, so difficult to deal with, and that was before guinea grass came in, which is now, 7-8 feet tall. So yeah, it was pretty hilarious when I think back to California grass being just this scourge, But, and then my parents, 5 years later after we moved here, in 1982, they retired and they moved on over. We built them a geodesic dome. So we had 2 geodesic domes joined by a kitchen. And my dad, was newly retired. He was 65, 66, I'm not sure. And he was ready to take the 2 acres of Mr. Motomura's old trees and clean it up. And because we weren't that interested in coffee back then. And he cleaned it up, and that's when we started coffee farming, was 1982. Because, when we moved here in 77, there was no money in coffee. You got 20 cents a pound for cherry. It was ridiculous. And people were bulldozing their coffee in those days and planting mac nuts. And then, of course, that flipped again. It just keeps flipping, depending on which is the most valuable. But, so he was pretty excited about the coffee. And we insisted on, him using organic methods, which... even though, the extension agents at that time told us, oh, no, you can't do it. You can't do it organically, right? But we were stubborn, and we did it. And so we had 3 acres that had been cleared by the previous person who had control of the property. And we planted coffee, mac nuts, cacao, citrus, bananas, pineapples, and other tropicals and subtropicals. And I've always had vegetable gardens. When we first moved here, you couldn't even buy broccoli at Choice Mart. So I planted broccoli. And remember, that was before Costco. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of food, and it was important to grow food, which it still is, as you all know. So in 1986, Kealakekua Ranch decided that they were going to sell all the leases fee simple, if you could afford it, if you could manage to get a loan and such. There are still some leases up there, people who weren't able to get the money to buy it fee simple, but we were so thrilled. We consider ourselves really lucky that, we were able to own the land. Although the funny thing was, when we bought the place, my dad goes, you never own the land owns you. And it's so true. So in the 1990s, I worked as business manager and bookkeeper for the Kona Historical Society. And it was a great job. I learned so much. And Sherwood Greenwell was amazing. I learned a lot from him. And Jean Greenwell, who was the society's historian, was also fabulous. She had done so much research, and I learned so much from her. And I was also really lucky because my best friend Sherry Chase was the curator, and she spent quite a few, well, let me back up a little bit. We were, one of the ideas that the Kona Historical Society decided to pursue was to tell the story of Kona coffee. And so we were kind of looking for a farm where we could tell that story. And one day Sherwood walked into the office. I'll never forget this. I was upstairs with Jill Olson at the time. She was our director. He walked in and he goes, and he was such a very wonderful man, very tall and very proper. And he said, I have a farm for you. And it was wonderful because one of the farms that they owned, they had been leasing it to the Uchitas, just right across the street here, the Uchita farm. They'd been leasing it to them since, 1920 or something. And the family was giving it up because the folks that were living there were quite elderly, and someone had walked down the driveway and robbed them. So their children on Oahu said, okay, you're out of here. You're coming to Oahu and live with us. And so they gave it back to Kealakekua Ranch, and it's amazing. If you've never been there, I highly recommend you go, because this house, the only thing they had actually done to it to change it from the 1920s was to add a tiny little toilet, bathroom, which they have since, they removed that early on. So Sherry Chase and she was the one that was responsible, but I used to tag along a lot, and we would go to all the old Japanese farmers and collect artifacts, and she would interview them. So there's a massive amount of interviews at the Kona Historical Society. All the old ranchers, the old coffee farmers. It's really quite extensive. I don't know their protocol anymore I think they charge now when you want to see, if they're going to pull something out for you, but it's still pretty amazing. They also have a very giant photo collection, just FYI. So that was kind of neat for me. I got to experience, these old timers in a way that I had not really experienced. One old man, he came out with a bag of Bull Durham bags, the little cotton tobacco bags, because they used to put them over the faucet, because you had the water tank, and you put the Bull Durham bag over where the faucet is, just to strain out whatever bugs or whatever were in your water tank. So that was their water purification system. And we're like, what do you use these for? So then he showed us, so it was pretty cool. Okay. My first husband passed away in the 1990s. And in 1999, my husband now, Leon Rosner, and we got together, and we were married on 01/01/01. We kind of started that, that trend. We do tend to be trendsetters. And, Leon had worked in agriculture both here, both in Kona and on the continent. He brought back a coffee farm, used to be called Pi'ilani Ranch, just before Ege Store down there. He and a bunch of people rebuilt the Hoshidana and, kind of brought a coffee farm back. So he knew a lot about farming. He also used to pick apples in the Okanagan. So, and we're a great team. We're really a great team. We have very different styles. He's our quality control guy. And he's our Mr. Fix-It, and he does all the mowing, and I do the coffee picking and planting the gardens, and yeah. So we're a great team. And we decided to name the farm Kuaiwi Farm. And for those of you that don't know, the Kuaiwi are the rocks, the sort of rock ridges that separate the Kihapai, the growing fields, from the Kona field system, the old, which was the pre-contact agricultural system here, before Captain Cook. And and they would grow tea plants on them, sugar cane next to them. I once read that they grew bananas on them, but that doesn't really work very well. Bananas like soil. They don't like rocks that much. I tried planting bananas in the rocks. They didn't like it. So on our farm, when you see a big line of tea, that's a kuaiwi. And they're usually about how many feet apart are they on this property? 50, 100?
Maybe 50 in some places. 50
Yeah, some places they're close, yeah. Yeah, so we have them all over our farm still, because very little of our farm has been, bulldozed. Okay. And then my dad started suffering from dementia in 2000, and I quit my job. Actually, I'd moved on to Hualalai Academy. I'd left Kona Historical Society. I worked at Hualalai Academy, wonderful little private school. I'm an accountant. And I quit my job to help my mom take care of my dad, and that's when I became a full-time farmer. And in 2001, we planted our first 200 cacao trees. Due to some bad initial advice on spacing, we lost half of them. We planted them way too close. We were told to plant them 3 feet apart. Don't do that. 6, 8, you give them a lot of room. And then we planted about another 100 since, and we've been making really great organic chocolate candies since 2007. We planted lots of endemics. We have mamaki, alahe'e, koaya, wili wili, mamane, ho'ava, ohia, koa, ule. We have 4 endemic hibiscuses. We have uki uki and akala. And aside from cash crops and endemics, we feel it's pretty vital on our island in the middle of the Pacific to grow much of our food. I really encourage y'all, grow food, please. I know that at the beginning of COVID, I was extremely excited to walk into Ace Hardware and see that all the seeds were gone. I was like, yes, people are growing food, because it's like pulling teeth getting people to grow food for themselves to eat. It's shocking, but I don't know why. There's a lot of different reasons. So I'm going to read you this. This comes from the ETC group, and it says, "We are told that it is big agribusiness with its flashy techno fixes and financial clout that will save the world from widespread hunger and malnutrition and help food systems weather the impacts of climate change. However, a report from the ETC group in 2017 shows that, in fact, it is a diverse network of small-scale producers dubbed the peasant food web that feeds 70% of the world. Okay? 70% of the world is fed by people feeding themselves and their neighbors, including the most hungry and marginalized people. So, yeah, gotta grow food, people. We are the peasant food web, okay?
All right.
I like that title. We love our Polynesian canoe crops too. We grow kalo and uala. and sugarcane, co. Ulu is still a work in progress. We're a little high, but I'm not giving up. We get fruits, they just drop off when they're the size of an orange, and I'm not sure. I don't know that that's cold that's doing it. Something else is doing it, and I think it's the wet, but I'll get into that. So we grow all the typical type vegetables too. We grow beans and tomatoes and eggplant and peas and collards and kale, chard, asparagus, beets, carrots. Um, but yeah, and we also grow a lot of the perennial food plants like pigeon pea and Malabar spinach and lilikoi. And in 2008, I was part of a nonprofit, as Louis was talking about, that was advocating for the non-growing of genetically engineered agriculture here in the state. And that kind of had disbanded by then. And I took that nonprofit and changed the name to Feed Hawaii. And I realized at the time that many people were beginning to grow food, but there was sort of a disconnect between the growing and getting it into the mouth. And so I was teaching people about cooking, and so I created a class called Ono Grinds, and people would come up to the farm and we would harvest a bunch of food, and then we'd bring it into the kitchen and we'd cut it up, do whatever we needed to, cook the taro, and then we would eat it. And it was really fun. And it was lovely. I mean, I don't know, somehow the interest waned and I stopped, but I do think there's a renewed interest in something similar at this point. And coffee. Coffee's always been hard, folks. Those of you that grow it know how much work it is and how labor intensive it is. But we didn't really know how much harder it could get. Until 15 years ago when we got the coffee berry borer. And then, 5 years ago we got the coffee leaf rust. And it's just, whew. Our old coffee trees were beautiful until 5 years ago. I mean, they were gorgeous. We gave them lots of love. They got compost, they got fertilizer. They were really spectacular. The trunks, some of the trunks were this big. Because we do have a lot of soil up there, which helps them to get quite large. And we've lost over 300 trees in the last 2 years. And I personally, from my observations, believe that it's sort of I don't think it's just the rust. I think it's a perfect storm of the rust and then more a lack of a dry season. I don't want to say more rain because I've been gauging rain for 30 years and it isn't more inches of rain in a year. It's that we haven't had a real dry season in 5 years. Those of you that have lived here for a while, remember that pretty much November, December, January, February, and into March was dry. And you were waiting for the rain, you were doing rain dances and all sorts of stuff. And we haven't had that. We get maybe a month dry, I water my garden some in the winter, I'm watering it a bit. But, and I think that created a situation where the root knot nematode that's always lived in our soil, now it lives for 12 months. Because before, when it used to get dry, the water table would go down so low, the nematodes went way, way, way deep, and they weren't chewing on the trees in the same way. And so I think it's partly that, because we do think it's the nematode, but we also think the rust is weakening, and there's some other fungal, there's also the anthracnose, but these were never a problem for us before, So I guess the rust is like the instigator, but it's also kind of a perfect storm. The other thing is that on my farm, even when we would get 10 inches of rain, I always used to say, I can get 10 inches of rain and there are no puddles. I never had a puddle on my farm, ever. In 2015, we had 55 inches over 6 weeks. the last 2 weeks of August and the month of September, there was flooding everywhere. Like, I don't know if y'all remember that, but I happened to be at dinner at the King Cam in the parking lot. The water was be up above our knees. But anyway, no puddles ever until this weird cycle thing. And now, like, we get an inch of rain and it's gushy, like it's mucky, and it's like it was never like that before. So I really would love to talk to a really smart soil scientist. I haven't found one yet that really understands this, but something has changed, and obviously we have climate change. So yeah, I can't figure it out. Nobody's really been able to help me much with it, but it is definitely different. We do solar electric, solar water heating. We're really trying to be pretty self-sufficient and, trying to help mitigate the carbon issue in our atmosphere. The last thing I really want to, and we also do agroforestry. So, we kind of like, I don't know, is this agroforestry? Maybe not. Some of it, yeah. So agroforestry, you're planting at 3 different levels, and we do we do some sisu spinach and pineapples on the bottom level. We have cacao on the middle level and coffee, and then we do fruit trees, avocados, and such on the upper level. So we really try and mix it up. We're definitely not monocroppers. We mix it up. It's really quite wonderful, and I'm really very concerned about invasives. So I can't leave a talk like this without talking about little fire ant. I do not have it. I don't ever want to get it. Some people tell me it's inevitable. We decided about 15 years ago when we first heard it, it was 14 years ago when it came to Kailua View Estates. First time it was found in the Kona district. And we just kind of had to close our borders really to all machinery and plant material. We have our own chipper now. So when we cut our coffee trees and stuff, we used to hire someone, but he was very lax about the concept of cleaning it and didn't really care, and we just knew that we weren't going to be able to trust that. So we chip our stuff constantly. We have our own mower. We got our own MacNut husker and cracker because we weren't willing to go bring our stuff to our friend who used to husk for us. He also was not paying any attention to it, and we just kind of had to put up the boundaries on the farm about it. So please check your plants, folks. Before you plant anything, do the peanut butter test. If you don't know what that is, go on the Hawaii Ant Lab website. It's real important. And I was super excited to meet the ladies with the dogs. That's so incredible. Do you have one?
No, but I was meeting her at
Yeah.
at the
So those of you that have dogs,
Terry Rolfe.
yeah,
Terry
Terry Rolfe, and the other gal was Bob Cowell's wife, Amy. They're training dogs to smell the little fire ant and the coconut rhinoceros beetle. And I always just assumed that one animal could only do one thing, right? Apparently they can do more than one, so it's incredible. And anybody who wants to take their dog to them, they're willing to train you to, they're doing a class, right? Some sort of like once a week. It's not a huge time commitment. I highly recommend if you have a dog. I don't have a dog, although I've been thinking about getting one. but I want a dog that kills mongoose and rats. That's my next thing. Yeah, mongoose and rats. We want a little terrier. I hear they're really good at it.
What about fire ants?
What was that?
Fire ants and coconut rhinoceros beetle.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
All those things.
Yeah. So just be careful, folks. Be careful what you bring onto your property, because generally you're going to bring it to your own property, although, it can come in through a neighbor. So, yeah, I guess that's it. But grow food, folks. Grow food. Protect your farm. Generate electricity. Do whatever you can do. Thank you.